Hi, Rebecca. Thanks very much for joining and part of Bubble's conversation on what we're as an industry expecting to see at ISE, particularly, what ISE insights will bring us for the future of AV. So thanks for your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking forward to chatting about it.
Brilliant. So, Rebecca, as the business development manager at Caretta Research, and also that you're speaking within the main IC conference, I know there's going to be some great insights that you're going to bring to this conversation. So, with that, I'm just going to jump straight in. So,
hmm
before we delve into the kind of picking your brain and thoughts, how many ICs have you been to?
So I've personally not been to any yet. This is going to be my first one. However, Caretta Research has been to two. So we're excited to kind of see how the trends have changed since our last time there, and also to meet some of the new vendors within the space, because I think it's easy to go on the first one and talk to lots of people you're familiar with. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of have conversations with new players within that space as well.
Great, brilliant. Oh, welcome to your first ISC. You're going to thoroughly enjoy it. Cool.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
Brilliant. So then, as you mentioned, it's your first one, and second for the team. So with that, then Rebecca, particularly for your first visit to ISC, are there any top trends that you actually anticipate seeing at the show, particularly across those different divisions of the AV industry?
Absolutely. So at Caretta Research, for a bit of background, we've traditionally really focused on the media tech space. And
Hmm.
right now, what we're finding really interesting is that convergence, as all kinds of business entity buyers are now using higher end audio and video production technology. So, because that technology that was traditionally used just in media tech is also being used as what we would now define as kind of a non traditional buyer or a pro AV buyer within our space, that's going to be a really interesting trend to continue exploring. And I think one of the reasons that we've seen this increase is because media tech has become democratized a lot more.
Hmm.
It's more widely accessible just in terms of how it's actually being delivered. And it's also more affordable. So, in terms of the accessibility aspect, what we found interesting is the fact that obviously the cloud products and those alternatives, as opposed to kind of a hard kind of switcher, makes it a lot more accessible for other organizations to have those. It also has become a lot more accessible in terms of the expertise required. So pro AV professionals can now start using that kind of technology a lot more as well. And then also affordability. There's lots of media tech vendors which have made their products more affordable for less kind of high scale production facilities. So Blackmagic's a good example of that in terms of how they're going to market with switches and with different types of products, which can now be accessed by a number of different buyers as opposed to only the traditional media tech buyers. Um, so we think that's really interesting because other than just these traditional buyers purchasing this tech, it's interesting because within these new organizations, it's also the types of teams that are using them. So we now have marketing teams using them. We have wedding videographers using them. We have kind of sports organizations using it. So the tech is being used for a lot of different things. And it's resulting in the professionalism of corporations in terms of their internal and external speaking. And then I think in terms of very specific trends of what we're seeing across different types of pro AV, we're seeing a lot of growth within teleconferencing, so within the offices themselves, both for internal and external comms. And then digital signage is just a massive kind of growing part of the pro AV space.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that you've touched on some really great points there. I think there's going to be lots of great insights and new things that we're going to be seeing and definitely talking about across the show floor and in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks for sharing those with us. So with that then, are there any challenges or opportunities that you foresee for AV professionals actually attending the show?
Yeah, so I think starting with the positives, the opportunity is definitely the professionalization and then additional streams of revenue for these new buyer types. We'll call them new buyer types within our worldview, I guess. But moving into the challenges, I think the biggest challenge that most AV professionals are going to be finding is actually finding the right technology to do higher end video, because there is now an expectation of them providing higher end video, whether that be for internal or external purposes.
Mhm.
But they now have to work with a number of vendors from a completely different industry as opposed to the traditional pro AV vendors only. So all of a sudden, instead of just knowing about kind of their main vendors like Microsoft and Cisco, they need to know about the Grass Valleys, the Rosses, the Sonys of the world. And it starts kind of changing what they need to be seeing. So I think that information gap that needs to be filled, and doing a good job at filling it, is really important for the professional, for the AV professionals, just because they will be moving into a competitive environment.
Mm.
So it's really important that they're really prioritizing that, because if we think about streamers on YouTube, even sports streamers, they deliver such high quality content that the kind of AV professionals need to be at that standard as well, which means they need to fill that information gap. But then in terms of the broadcasters, the AV professionals themselves, they not only need to fill this information gap, but they also need to purchase technology that's going to be used by the wider team as well, not only them. And that means kind of purchasing technology that might be more accessible to the less tech savvy people, let's say. For anyone who wants to go into a meeting room and set up a conferencing call, they need to know the equipment's going to work in kind of 30 seconds, be easy to use. Otherwise, it's inevitably going to end up sitting there. So making sure that it's kind of easy to use as well. And then I think there's the other side of it, which is the media tech vendor side, which is the world that we're kind of living in. They need to learn how to talk to different types of buyers. So instead of going to market with selling solutions, which has primarily been their way to market previously, they've been selling kind of the specific tech specs. What they need to do now is come in with the, what's this going to solve for you? So this will make your boardroom more dynamic. This will make your meetings a lot higher quality. This will kind of facilitate your external and internal comms. And it needs to be that messaging, which currently we haven't fully seen that shift happening yet. But I think that's going to be absolutely mandatory for them to succeed within this space.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's really good. Another good point. I think that's going to be something that we're going to see across the halls for companies that specialize within the corporate AV environment, the different workspace environments and such like. So cool. Brilliant. So then some of those trends that you've mentioned, can you share any stats or any particular findings on any of the kind of growth areas that you actually see within some of those sectors or the industry?
So from our research, I think the biggest opportunity that we've seen within Pro AV for media tech vendors specifically, and the segments that we've seen the most investment from into more complicated video technology, is from corporate or retail brands, from events and performing arts, and then from sports clubs and leagues, which could also arguably include collegiate sports, which we've seen a lot of growth in that area as well. The reasons for this, so for corporate and retail brands, they're really focusing on doing better video for both internal and external comms. Events and performing arts, I mean, event production has been massive within 2024 and will continue to be within 2025. If we think festivals, if we think the Eras Tour, if we think theater and opera, there's so many events happening, and technology is kind of pivotal to that continuing to be so successful, both for in-person events, but also for providing content from these events back to the audiences. And then on the sports side, what we're seeing is an increase in doing direct to consumer for that fan engagement purpose. So having videos other than the matches themselves, like training videos, interviews with players, kind of pushing that fan engagement that will ultimately hopefully feed through to merchandising, has been really important. So that's where we've seen the most growth and where we expect to continue seeing the most growth, in terms of the specific segments of the corporate world. If we look at it in terms of specific tech that's being purchased, I would say that probably around half of the spend is on the video technology, from content acquisition through to distribution. So the major focus would be on the acquisition itself. So like the cameras, the production tech, the switchers, because people need that more high quality video. And then through the distribution, we're seeing quite a lot of spend on their own OVPs internally, which previously we didn't see that extent, and that's definitely growing. And that's both for sports, we've seen a lot of growth there, or even for universities who are kind of providing their lectures online now as well. And then the other half of what we're seeing spend on is the production services and content services. So people going to other kind of services to help them create these videos. That being said, that still does benefit the media tech world quite a lot, because these production service companies also need to buy the tech in order to be providing these services. So they'll be burning through tech a lot quicker, and they'll also need different types of technology for the different types of engagement, because you need different cameras for sports, news, one advert here, another advert next weekend. So we've seen a lot of growth within that segment as well.
Great. Cool. Well, then, Rebecca, finally, then, I guess really, obviously, I know it's your first ISE, but I know that you attend a lot of industry trade shows. So, what have you got in mind? A kind of a hint or a tip that you're going to take with you for actually surviving the scale of a show like ISE?
Yeah, I think on a funny but very serious note for me, it's wearing comfortable shoes. You're gonna walk a lot at a trade show, and I think on my first trade show ever, I made that mistake and paid for it for the rest of the week. So having comfortable shoes is 100% necessary, and staggering the coffees, because you're gonna be offered coffee everywhere you go, and it's very easy to have drunk 8 before kind of 12 p.m. and you're shaking. So I think just kind of making sure that even as you're running to all these busy meetings and doing 100 things, prioritizing your comfort and your health is always going to be my number one tip in terms of anything like this.
Definitely. 'Cause I think when you set out in the morning, your schedule's so busy, like all of us, we just go, go, go. And we have
Mhm.
to kind of think about keeping the hydration. Obviously, coffee's the great for the energy. And you're right about staying comfy on those feet because we're on them all day.
Exactly, exactly.
Right. Oh, well, Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing those insights, particularly, delving into some more of those findings that you and Caretta have been seeing over recently and the kind of interest that you've got leading into the show. So thank you very much for spending your time with us. Great as always to see you. And God, in a matter of weeks, we look forward to seeing you in
Yeah,
Barcelona.
thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Great. Thank you.